Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto's Sister Got the Fox and He Got Wood release part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. In Inuzuka, Naruto whispered to which Itachi heard and nodded. Her name is Hana Inuzuka, the heiress of the Inuzuka clan. My Ka-san and hers are old friend back from their genin days, he said as Naruto nodded. I think the same for mine. Continuing to look around the room there were two others that stood out to him. One was a sickly-looking child who was coughing every few minutes. His skin was slightly pale and looked like he could be knocked over by a simple gust of wind. He had brown hair and arc eyes and rested his arms on the desk. The girl beside him was a purple-haired girl that had her hair tied up in a pineapple-shaped ponytail. She had a dark shirt on along with a slightly tanned skirt. She was playing with a kunai in her hands and looked like she wanted to throw it at the nearest person she could find. Naruto shook his head before his mind wandered elsewhere and thought about his current strength. His Fuinjutsu had now completed level 2 and was now moving on to level 3. Hiruzen no longer acted surprised when it came to his Fuinjutsu. He knew Naruto was in every way a prodigy when it came to the art. Since level 2 focused on weight seals and things of that nature, he and Hiruzen applied a few weight seals to him to help with his body conditioning and to improve his strength and stamina. He had mastered the water jutsu he took from his parents' library, thought it took him a little while to fully get it down. Afterwards he just found water jutsus just fitted him, and since his parents were so focused on Kushina's pregnancy, neither noticed him make a few more stops to their library. Now he knew 3 water jutsus while Itachi had knew 3 fire jutsus. His training with Shizune continued and was surprised when Tsunade got involved and decided that since Hiruzen was teaching him Fuinjutsu and Shizune his chakra control, she would teach him taijutsu since it was one of her specialties. She had tried to show him the slug-style taijutsu but she quickly found it just did not fit his style at all. So instead she began showing him the senju style. Even though she did not use it often herself, she was trained in it since it was her clan's taijutsu style. While it was not perfect for him, he made it work, plus Tsunade had been adjusting small parts of the style to help fit him. She even had Might Guy, Konoha's resident taijutsu expert, come and take a look at the style for Naruto. Guy had cried out how wonderful it was that Naruto was training to become a great shinobi and cried out about some youth for whoever knows why. Guy even showed him some of the Goken style. When Naruto showed an aptitude for that style as well, Guy and Tsunade decided to entwine the two styles together and create something completely new. They didn't have a name for it yet, but Naruto knew it had to be something awesome. And when it came to taijutsu, Naruto was learning quickly as well, once again showing that being a prodigy and being hard-working was already paying off for him. Naruto, pay attention, Itachi said, elbowing him in the side, jogging Naruto back to attention. Right, sorry, Naruto whispered back as Itachi shook his head at his friend's habit of letting his mind wander. Naruto paid close attention to his sensei and what he was discussing to the class, thought he had noticed that some of it Shizune had already covered in his studies with her. I don't think the academy is all it is cracked up to be, he thought to himself as he shook his head and tried to drown out his sensei's voice. The purple-haired girl next to Naruto saw his lazy form and the look on his face and covered her mouth to stop from giggling. Young lady, is there something you wish to say to the class? Their sensei said, who looked like he did not enjoy being interrupted, while all student eyes fell onto the purple-haired girl. The girl blushed a little and twiddled her index fingers together. No sir, sorry sensei. What is your name? He asked, looking towards her. The girl stuttered a little. Why, Yugao Azuki. Well then, Miss Azuki, please try and keep any comments of noises to yourself, he said before he continued with his teachings. Nodding, she fell quiet as the rest of the class fell back to listening to their sensei, everyone except Naruto, who had turned his attention to Yugao. What were you laughing at? He asked since he had heard her giggle from beside him. I was laughing at you. You had a funny look on your face and made me laugh, she said as Naruto's eyes shot up in surprise before internally he grinned. You mean expressions like this? He asked before he began pulling multiple different faces at Yugao, who was turning red and had to cover her mouth with her hands. Their sensei never saw any of this as Naruto pulled funny faces at Yugao, who looked ready to burst out laughing. Next to him, Itachi rolled his eyes, though half a smile on his face as he watched his friend act that way. Though Naruto was a lot like him and was quiet and serious most of the time, he had moments where a more fun-loving personality took hold of him. It was a lot like his mother's in that way. Naruto had inherited more than just his eyes from his mother. From the front row, Hana Inuzuka saw what he was doing and laughed into her hand as well, thinking that what he was doing was very funny. While at the back row, the other purple-haired girl and the sickly boy laughed as well, though the sickly boy needed to cough every few minutes, which gained much attention from their sensei. End of the day. At the end of their first academy day, most of the children went home to their parents so they could tell them all about the great first day and what they had learned. Everyone except for a group of 6 children, that is, Naruto and Itachi, were once again training with each other in the same opening in the forest as before. The others 4 had followed them after school to see what they were doing. The 4 were none other than Hana Inuzuka, Yugao Azuki, Anko Mitarashi, and Hayate Gecko. The 4 had become quick friends, but when they had tried to befriend Naruto and Itachi, the 2 boys kept eluding them and separated themselves from everyone else. They almost spoke with them during lunch, but the academy school bell rung, and when they looked back, the 2 boys had already disappeared. Hayate-kun, stop coughing or they will know we are here, Yugao said to the ill boy, who nodded. My apologies, Yugao-san. The pollen from the plants is making it difficult to breathe, he said as he tried to get his coughing under control. Shish, stop talking you two or our cover will be blow, Hana whispered a little harshly while Anko grinned as she watched them. I wonder how strong they are. I bet they would be a good fight, she said, licking her lips a little before zoning in on scene in front of them. Wait, where did the Uchiha go? They all looked in front of them and realized that Itachi had indeed disappeared and that Naruto was now just standing still and was looking towards where they were hidden. You know, you 4 can come out now. We know you have been following us since we left the academy, Naruto called out, making the 4 freeze in place. We would appreciate it if you could just come on out, a voice said from behind them, making them jump out of their skin and turn around to see Itachi with an amused expression on his face. You know, if you wanted to watch us or train with us, you could have must come out and say it. There was no need to just hide, Naruto added, appeared in front of them. The 4 kids looked a little embarrassed and went a little red. From Hana's side, the 3 pups sniffed the air and padded over towards Naruto. Naruto saw the 3 pups and smiled as he went down on his knees and began petting them. The pups seemed to enjoy it since they were wagging their tails and had their tongues hanging out of their mouths. Whoa, that was quick, Hana said as she walked towards them. I have only had them for about 6 months and they have never taken to someone so quickly before. They must really like you. They are called the 3 Harimaru brothers, she said, introducing them. The 6 introduced themselves properly, and after a few minutes of talking and Anko asking whether they could train with them, Naruto and Itachi shrugged and told them it was fine. As the 4 revised what they had gone over that day, Anko looked towards Naruto and Itachi and saw that the 2 boys were facing across from each other. In the blink of an eye, the 2 suddenly charged forwards towards each other and began throwing punch and kicks towards each other. They stayed that way for a few minutes as each tried to land a hit on each other. The 4 recognized Itachi's way of fighting was that of the Uchiha clan fighting style, while the one Naruto was using looked like the Senju style, though a few bits of it was off and it looked like another form that they did not recognize. It also made them wonder why Naruto was not suing the Uzumaki style that his mother knew, since Kushina was quite well known for her strong taijutsu prowess. The 2 were then forced and stumbled back when both managed to land a punch on the other's cheek. Shaking out of their slightly dazed state, the 2 quickly focused their chakra and made the necessary hand seals. Fire-style fireball jutsu, Itachi called out as he blew out a large fireball that went towards Naruto. Water-style water bullet jutsu, Naruto declared as clumps of water shot out from his mouth. The toe jutsus collided in the middle, causing a small blast to be created from the impact as well as steam from where the water met the fire. The steam caused the view of the two to get blocked out for a few minutes as the four tried to make out where the two boys were. Though they knew they were fighting if the sounds they could hear were any indication. They are incredible, Yugao said as she watched their sparring bout with each other. I didn't think people our age could do elemental ninjutsu. I mean, they are so hard to do and the chakra control has to be so precise. Hayate spoke as he coughed again into his hand, making Yugao pat him on the back. Oh man, these two are good. We really need to catch up with them if they are already at this kind of level. Hana said while Yugao and Hayate nodded before noticing Anko had disappeared. Where is Anko-san? Hayate asked, looking around. Striking shadow snakes, a voice called from within the steam cloud. When it did, Naruto appeared jumping out of the cloud from one side while Itachi jumped out the other, both looking a little surprised from the interruption. The steam mist disappeared and they were all surprised to see Anko in the middle with what looked like two fairly large green snakes coming out from her sleeves, both impacting the ground where Naruto and Itachi were formerly standing. Snakes. They all thought while Naruto and Itachi narrowed their eyes as the snakes and the purple-haired girl. They were wary of her suddenly because of that snake jutsu she used. There was only one person that both were aware of that had connections to snakes and who could use snake-like jutsus, and that man was no longer part of the Leaf and was one of the worst traitors that the world had ever seen. Itachi's parents had told him while Hiruzen and Tsunade had told Naruto of this man. So it left the question to the two boys that was, now on both of their minds. How can she do snake techniques? Anko meanwhile grinned at Hana, Yugao, and Hayate shocked looks and Naruto and Itachi's weary and thinking looks. You boys didn't think you were the only toe with tricks up their sleeve, did you? Month later. Some time passed since the 6 academy students met each other and the 6 quickly became fast friends and an inseparable group. Since the first training session, the 6 met up whenever they could and would spar with one another and help each other get stronger. The academy quickly saw that Naruto and Itachi were prodigies after only a few days. It was mainly noticeable when the two were first showed how to do the henge technique and managed to master it by the end of the day, which left the instructors baffled. Itachi was quickly becoming known as the prodigy of the Uchiha clan, where Fugaku and Makoto were immensely proud of their son, while Naruto was the same for his family. He was even surprised when Kushina and Minato had hugged the life out of him when they found out. Though the small celebration did not last long, Naruto enjoyed that moment where his parents' eyes and attention was focused only on him. Tsunade, Hiruzen and Shizune marveled at it, though since they were training him before the academy it did not come as much of a surprise. Meanwhile Anko was quickly becoming the best of the girls, though Yugao and Hana were doing their best to give her a run for her money. Though Anko was strong for her age, she was not quite at Naruto and Itachi's level, though when she sparred with the two, she made sure to make them sweat as much as possible. So Gigi, are you sure you don't mind taking me? Naruto asked Hiruzen as they walked down the market towards a shinobi store that Hiruzen had told him about and had wanted to take him to for some time now. Of course Naruto-kun, now that you are in the academy it's time to get your some proper shinobi clothing and some proper weapons and equipment. Even though it's the person that makes the shinobi, it is essential that you have the correct equipment with you and that you are wearing appropriate clothing. Hiruzen glanced down at his surrogate grandson. So an orange jumpsuit would definitely be out then. Naruto said, pointing towards an orange get-up in the window of one of the stores. Unless you want to be a walking target, then yes Naruto, it is definitely out. Hiruzen said, shaking at the mere thought of someone wearing clothing that color. Somewhere in Konoha a jonin wearing tight green spandexes with orange leg warmer sneezed. But I didn't bring enough money, Gigi, Naruto said as he began checking his pockets. I'm not sure I can afford it. Ka-chan and Tu-san forgot to give me my pocket money this week. Do not worry about money, Naruto-kun. I will buy you everything you need, he said, patting the boy on the shoulder. Naruto wanted to argue, but he knew his Gigi would only tell him that a grandfather was allowed to spoil his grandson whenever he wanted. Plus his Gigi was a former Kage, so if there was anyone who knew the right equipment to wear and the correct clothing, then it was him. He was the man who fought in the First Shinobi War, was picked by Tobimura Senju to become his successor and lead the Leaf to victory in the Second and Third Shinobi Wars. Okay, Gigi, Naruto answered, getting a smile from Sarutobi in return. He was happy that Hiruzen still spent time with him and trained him even when he actually had a real grandson now. Konohamaru Sarutobi was born a month before little Mina was born by Hikaru Sarutobi, his eldest child and only daughter. And they named him after the village since they knew he was going to be a great shinobi one day. After walking for another 10 minutes, they eventually stopped at a moderate-sized store on the edge of the shinobi district of the market. I have been coming to this store since I was a young man, Naruto-kun. There is no place better in my mind to get your shinobi supplies than this store, he said as he led the Naruto inside. As soon as they walked in, Naruto saw locking seals on the door hinges. To stop burglars, he mused to himself. Tyranno, Sarutobi called out just as a man in his mid-30s appeared from behind the counter with brown hair and wearing civilian clothing. Ah, Hiruzen, it's good to see you. What can I help you with? He asked as he noticed Naruto beside him. And this must be Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of the Minato and Kushina. I was wondering when you were going to bring him here. Now that Naruto-kun is in the academy, I believed it was time to get him his proper shinobi gear. Well, I am honored you came to my store. I am glad the shinobi of the village continued to come here even after my father passed the store down to me. To-san, look. A squeaky voice called, making them look over to see a little brown-haired girl with her hair tied in two buns wearing a little pink top and shorts with a wooden kunai in her hands. I can finally throw it on the target right, she said, making Tyranno and Hiruzen laugh. That is great, sweetie. Hiruzen, you remember my daughter Ten, he said as Hiruzen gave her a small hello, as did Naruto, while the girl went towards her father, who lifted her up and sat her on the counter. Naruto looked around the store, and it was no wonder why the place was popular with the shinobi in the village, as well as why his Gigi liked it so much. On the walls as well as in secure racks were weapons of all different types. Swords, axes, nunchaku, sai, and a whole range more. On another side were rows and row of different clothing ranging from kids his age to people the size of Akamichis, and were in a variety of colors, though most were dark colors, the brightest being a purple and red top and skirt. This all so cool, he said as he began to pick through the clothing range and find something that suited him, while Hiruzen spoke with Tyranno and cooed over little Ten. 10 minutes later he had 5 black tops with a blue stripe going through the middle, while he had 5 sets of pants and sandals that ranged from black and gray in color. Next he moved on to his kunai and shuriken. The ones he currently had been ones Minato previous used and had given to Naruto since they were still in great condition. Hiruzen joined him and began helping him. He nodded approvingly at the clothes Naruto picked out. A kunai and shuriken made of chakra metal. Good eye, Naruto. Chakra metal? Naruto asked, not quite remembering what it was. It is metal that allows chakra to run through it, so that it makes the attack stronger than just using it normally, he said as Naruto marveled at it. He wondered why more ninjas did not use it, though when he thought about it, his mother used a sword, and when he had seen her using it before the twins were born, he remembered it glowed blue. He realized it must have been chakra metal. They added them to the basket and continued looking through the small aisles. They also got to a small section that had scrolls and inks for fuinjutsu. They also sold sealing scrolls. Naruto didn't know that someone could sell sealing scrolls or other sealing-related equipment. He made a memory to save that information for later. Finally they browsed at the different weapons they had on display as Naruto and Hiruzen looked over them. You know, Naruto, your mother is very powerful when it comes to the art of a sword. She could probably fight the 7 swordsmen equally and come out on top if she wanted to. Hiruzen said as he picked up a katana, looked it over and handed it to Naruto. Maybe you might follow in her footsteps. Naruto took the katana in his right hand. He held it in his hand and swung it through the air a little. He looked it over and had to admit it was a beautiful katana, and he knew the art of a sword was a major area of being a shinobi. There was Kiri, who he knew had the 7 shinobi swordsmen of the mist, 7 of the best there was with a sword. Kumo, he had been told, learned an academy style of kenjutsu whilst in the academy and normally carried a sword with them. Then there was Iron Country, where they had samurai instead of shinobi and were training extensively in the art of kenjutsu. Hiruzen watched as a frown appeared on his face. What's the matter, Naruto-kun? I'm not too sure, Gigi. It is just the sword does not feel right in my hands, he said as Hiruzen and Torano looked in surprise. Interesting, they both thought. As for the next 10 minutes, Naruto tried handling all the swords that Torano had, but yet all of them just did not feel right in Naruto's hands, with him saying that they just felt off. This is an interesting development, Hiruzen said, tapping his chin. Are you sure wielding a sword is something you want, Naruto? Naruto just nodded his head. I want to be a great kenjutsu user and to one day surpass my Ka-chan. Torano listened in and spoke what he was thinking. You know, when my father ran this store, he always told me that a sword were like an extension of one's arm and that swords in a way have a life of their own. He said that the wielder does not choose the sword, but instead the sword chooses the wielder. Maybe the reason you don't connect with the swords is because the sword you are supposed to wield has not been made yet, he offered as Hiruzen and Naruto thought about it. Little Ten meanwhile just listened and watched from the top of the counter. Would you make the sword? Hiruzen asked as Torano shook his head. Not myself, but I have a trader from Iron Country that visits here a few times a year. He worked for my father and even did some business with. I can contact him and ask for a blacksmith to construct a sword for Naruto. The man he does dealing with, believe it or not, is Muramasa Sengo, he said, getting a look of surprise from Hiruzen. Who is that, Gigi? Naruto asked. Muramasa Sengo is one of the best blacksmiths of our era, Naruto-kun. His katanas and weapons he makes are works of art, and many would like to get their hands on one of his swords. He is also the man who built your mother's katana, Torano said, getting a look of surprise from Naruto. He had only seen his mother katana a few times since she always kept it in a storage seal on her wrist, but it was truly a beautiful katana. It was called the Kidetsu. Seeing his mother wield a blade was one of the reasons he wanted to become great at kenjutsu and to one day surpass her, since she was the best in Konoha. Would you really be able to get Muramasa Sengo to make Naruto a sword? Hiruzen asked as Torano nodded. He was good friends with my father and always offered to help him. He gave me the same courtesy. Knowing that he is building a first-class katana for a boy who wants to be a great kenjutsu wielder and uses its strength to protect those precious to him, I know he will say yes. It might take a month or two, but expect one of the finest katanas you will ever see becoming yours, Naruto, he said, making the boy smile brightly. We can sort out payment later, he said as they all nodded and paid for the current equipment in their basket. So I would like everyone to say congratulations to your classmates Itachi Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and Anko Mitsurashi for passing the academy in just 1 year. Wish them all the best as they take their first major step as shinobi of the leaf. Naruto, Itachi and Anko stood at the front of their class with smiles on their face as their fellow students called and told them well done. After a year at the academy, the teachers there along with the council knew that despite only being 9, that the 3 were more than ready to become genin. All 3 easily outclassed the others in the class, and that keeping them in the academy would be a waste of their talents. Yugao, Hayate and Hana clapped the loudest to their friends and had sworn that they would do their best to catch up with the trio by next year. Now the real path of being a shinobi begins, Naruto said as Itachi nodded like he normally did while Anko grinned a big smile. It's about time too. I was beginning to get so bored here that I thought my head was going to roll off my shoulders from the boredom. I am honored to have the 3 of you in my class for the little time that you were here. Good luck in your shinobi careers. I know that all three of you are going to go far, their sensei said as he bowed back. Thank you, sensei, they said at the same time. Your new Jonin sensei has told me that you will meet them on the roof and that they will be there in 10 minutes' time. The three nodded, gave a wave to their three friends who did the same before they exited the classroom. As they got out of the room, they nodded to each other before mange the ram seal with their hand and shunshine to the roof. They had learnt that move from Hiruzen after Naruto had asked him to teach him a jutsu during one of their breaks from Fuinjutsu. He had thought about it for a few minutes before settling that Naruto was ready to learn the body flicker technique. Once he taught it to Naruto, the blonde boy then taught it to the others. Hana, Hayate and Yugao struggled with it and was still trying to learn it while Itachi and Anko had it down within a few days. Arriving on the roof, the three sat together on the floor. Naruto read a book on Fuinjutsu. Itachi stared at the clouds while Anko twirled a kunai around her index finger. So any idea who we have as our sensei? Anko asked the two boys. Both shook their heads. No idea, but I hope they are strong whoever they are. I can't wait to get some more training done, Naruto said, showing just how much of a training nut he was. Thankfully it was not on the level of a certain spandex wearing Jonin. Whoever they are, I am sure they are capable. Hokage-sama would not have put us with someone who could not handle the task. As they nodded, Naruto gripped his hand a little tightly on the sword that he was carrying in his right hand before he placed it in his lap. After 2 months of the order going out from Torino at the shinobi store, the katana that he was waiting for finally arrived. And when he first saw it, he could not help but admire how beautiful and different it was. Torino even said it must have been one of Masamune's finest work. The blade was 27 inches long and the metal was, much to his surprise, black with a distinct red edge, and its hand guard had flower-like edges. The handle was a dark purple color while the sheath was plain black but had 2 Uzumaki spirals in red going up the side. One of the first things Naruto noticed was that it was a little bit heavier than other swords, but he was told that was due to the metal of the blade being harder and denser than other blades, which would give it more physical strength. He knew it would take a bit of time to get used to it, but since his weight seal were now up to 30 pounds on each limb, he knew the weight of the blade would not be a problem. When he had received it, he, Hiruzen, Shizune and Tsunade had marveled at how elegant yet powerful the blade looked, with all three claiming they had never seen a blade quite like it. After receiving it, he had given it a name that he knew would one day make this blade famous. The Shisui. Everyone else agreed that the name just fit the blade. He made a storage seal on his wrist similar to his where his mother kept hers, since he wanted to keep the Shisui on him at all times. He tried to show Kushina the blade, but she only looked at it while it was in its sheath, much to his annoyance. He debated in his head whether to ask her to teach him kenjutsu, but due to past experiences of wanting to ask either Kushina and Minato to train him, he decided against it and figured he would eventually come across a style that worked for him. Until then, he could practice with it nonetheless. When it was not sealed up, it was strung to his side. He didn't want to strap it since it just felt right staying in his hands. If I ever meet Muramasa, then I must give him my eternal thanks for this, he thought. As he thought about his sword, an energy signature he recognized appeared to be heading towards them at a great speed. Itachi and Anko saw him tense up a little and were now on alert, since they recognized when Naruto could sense someone. While they readied to defend themselves, they saw Naruto quickly relax, indicating whoever it was they were not hostile towards them. Just as they three settled, a swirl of leaves appeared in front of them. When the leaves all disappeared, they all looked in surprise, especially Itachi, when the person standing in front of them was none other than a Jonin uniform-clad Makoto holding little Ria in her arms, who was giggling madly. Makoto Obasan, Ka-san, what are you doing here? Itachi asked, since he was surprised to see his mother wearing her Jonin uniform. He could not remember the last time had seen her in her old shinobi uniform, which looked like most of the other uniforms, except she had an only one sleeve, leaving the other arm bare, and wrapped around her left thigh was a gray sash with the kanji for fire on it, while on her back was a strapped tanto. Well, is that not obvious, Itachi-kun? You are waiting for your Jonin-sensei and here I am, she said, getting 3 gobsmacked looks before Naruto fist pumped the air. Awesome. Makoto Obasan is our sensei, he cheered as little Ria looked a little confused but cheered as well. Anko looked happy since she knew that Makoto Uchiha aka Konoha no Hai Misudaresu, Fire Mistress of Konoha, was one of the best kunoichis in the village. She was up there with Tsunade and Kushina. Are you sure, Ka-san? But what about Sasuke and Ria? And does Tu-san know about this? Do not worry, Itachi-kun. Sasuke will stay with one of our sitters while Ria will be with me during our D-rank missions. Then when we eventually get to higher missions, I will arrange for some of the other clan members to watch over them while I am with you all. And do not worry about your father. Even if he does not like it, I am a shinobi of this village and I felt it was time to get back into this life. Plus I have always wanted to take a genin team, and who better than the team my son is in, she said, kissing his forehead making him blush a little while Ria sat in her big brother's lap. Well, now that I am here we can introduce ourselves to one another since it is a must-do for a new team, she said as she sat in front of her new team. Say your name, your likes, dislikes, hobbies and dreams for the future. I will start. My name is Makoto Uchiha, I like my family, fire jutsus, my friends in the village. My dislikes are traitors, rapists, those who hurt children and those that dare to hurt my family. My hobbies are learning something new every day and cooking. My dreams for the future has already come true, she said as she looked at her oldest and youngest and smiled. Anko, why don't you start? My name is Anko Mitsurashi. I like my few friends, Dango, fighting and blood, she said, making them sweat drop a little at the last part. My dislikes are perverts, men who think women can't be as strong as them, arrogance and more. My hobbies are making people who I don't like miserable. My dreams for the future, to kill a certain white snake, she said as she got serious at the last part. Her 2 teammates looked at her curiosity since she had never mentioned that last part before, whilst Makoto narrowed her eyes. She, like the other higher-ups in the village, were aware of Anko's past and understood why she wanted that as her dream. Itachi was up next. My name is Itachi Uchiha. My likes are my friends, family, ninjutsu and genjutsu and visiting cafes. My dislikes are those who try to hurt my precious people, stake, and those who think they are better than everyone else and who only crave power for selfish reasons. My hobbies are meditating and training to be a great shinobi. My dream is to protect my home and surpass the Uchihas of old. And now our last member, she said, nodding to Naruto, who nodded. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. My likes are my precious people, ramen, fuinjutsu and kenjutsu. My dislikes are people who try to hurt my precious people, rapists, perverts and those that gain power for selfish reasons. My hobbies are training, spending time with my Gigi and my friends. And my dream for the future is to surpass my parents and to become a great protector of the village. That is a wonderful dream, Naruto. It sounds like you want to be Hokage one day. Naruto shrugged. If my path as a shinobi leads me there, then I guess so. Me, Ria said as she put her hand up, wanting to have a go, making the others laugh at the cute little girl. Another time, Ria-chan, Makoto said, taking her daughter from her eldest and making the girl pout a little. So what do we do now? Naruto asked. Well, now we will break up for the rest of the day. We don't need to get familiar with one another since we all know each other. Tomorrow I want all of you to go to training ground 13 since I want to test how strong the 3 of you are. I have an idea on Itachi and a little on Naruto, but none on you, Anko. I want you all there at 9 a.m. Understood. Hi sensei, the 3 spoke, making Makoto smile. This is going to be an interesting experience. I can't wait to rub in Kushina's face, she thought, chuckling evilly in her mind. Since you are the only team who have currently graduated from the academy, the 3 of you are automatically made genin. I hereby announce us as Team 13, she declared, getting big smiles from Naruto and Anko and a small smile from Itachi. Nodding and smiling at them and saying goodbye, Makoto shunshined away with Ria in her arms, leaving the new Genin team alone. In Hokage office, Minato sat behind his desk, putting a hand through his hair as he sat across from one of the few men in the elemental nations that could fight him one-on-one. On his right was Kakashi and on his left was Jiraiya, whilst Kushina was sat next to him. Over on one of the sofas was Sarutobi with his pipe in his mouth, as remained passive but on alert with their guests. The man in front of them was the fourth Raikage of Kumo and the man who Minato had many battle with in the past. Was a big man with dark skin and whitish blonde hair that was slicked back with a goatee on his chin. He wore his Raikage cloak and hat, whilst around his wrists were golden weights and around his waist was a large gold belt. Beside there were two men. One had white spiky hair that covered part of his left eye and also wore a standard white Kumo flak jacket. On his back was a cleaver-like sword and on his right arm was the symbol for black lightning. To his right was a Caucasian man wearing the standard Kumo shinobi uniform but had bandages wrapped around the top of his head and his forehead protector covered his right eye. "Welcome to the Leaf Village, Raikage-sama. I am happy that you made it here safe and sound," Minato spoke as snorted a little but thanked him nonetheless. "Yes, well, since we are here, we may as well get right down to it. No sense in postponing this," he said as Minato nodded while Kushina kept her guard up. Since the attempted kidnap on her life by Kumo shinobis when she was younger, she had always been very weary around Kumo shinobi. To be frank, she did not trust them one little bit. "I agree. I see no reason why our two villages should have to be at each other's throats nay more, and I am more than willing to put the past behind us if it mean the Leaf and the Cloud can finally see each other as allies other than enemies. I agree as well. As Raikage, the safety of my village is my top priority and it will always come first. If it means keeping any ridiculous wars from breaking out again, then I will do it." Minato nodded to that as well. Though he and never exactly saw eye to eye, he was glad that as the Kage of his village he understood that alliances would truly benefit one another. Kumo had always been more militarized than Konoha, but then again Kumo had always been a very tightly knit and army-like village, whereas Konoha was a bit more relaxed in that sense but always kept their guard up. "I am surprised that your brother B is not here. Normally the two of you are inseparable," Minato asked as he narrowed his eyes a little at the comment. "B is a Jinchuriki, therefore he knows that his place is to stay at the village and be a protector Kumo. As a Jinchuriki he is a tool to be used to keep Kumo safe." The Leaf Ninja frowned at that but knew that was mostly how other Jinchuriki were treated like. "You know, I have always been curious to who the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi was. Since you know who Kumo's Jinchurikis are, do you not think we should know who yours is?" That made everyone tense while Kushina and Minato looked at the man dangerously. Something that made the white-haired man tense and prepare himself. Kakashi did the same. "That information is classified, Raikage-sama," Minato spoke in a calm and even tone. "Oh, so do you believe that my village does not deserve to know of your weapon while you know ours?" Said with his voice getting a little louder. Kushina slammed her fist on the table. "Jinchurikis are not tools that you can control simply because of what they contain. They are human beings who carry a great burden on their shoulders." Didn't look affected by the comment but instead just raised an eyebrow at her outburst while Minato smoothed her by rubbing small circles on her hand. "You are oddly protective towards them, which leads me to guess that your Jinchuriki is someone close to you." All the Leaf Shinobi tensed again and were mentally preparing themselves for some kind of confrontation since Kushina's face contorted to a look that showed she was ready to kill. "Well, if you won't tell us, then perhaps it was a mistake coming here, since you cannot be honest with us when we are being honest with you." "Honest?" Kushina said, snorting. "Like how you tried to kidnap me when I was a girl and yet tried to deny it." "Yes, very honest. What my father did when he was Raikage does not fall to me. To be honest, I never really understood the big fuss about you Uzumaki. All you were ever good at was Fuinjutsu and Kenjutsu. The rest you were just mediocre at." Kushina looked like she was about to bow up at the comment A was making at her while the white-haired man just shook his head and face-palmed. Minato did the same thing knowing this meeting was not going well at all. And Kushina had never liked each other and he knew it was a mistake bringing her to this meeting. Perhaps coming here was a mistake, said standing up from his chair making everyone else stand up as well. Perhaps we can speak more of this tomorrow. Let's keep a cool head, think on it tonight and then resume tomorrow the details of the alliance, Minato offered since he really wanted some kind of treaty to be formed between their two villages which could stop any confrontations from happening in the future. Minato did not wish for another war to break out. He wanted to keep the children of the village to have to succumb to that path. Scoffed but nodded nonetheless. Tomorrow we will continue this. Until then we shall take up residence in the Golden Leaf Hotel, he said as Minato nodded. Then jumped through the window, making his departure from the meeting. The white-haired man sighed before giving Minato a small smile. Sorry about the window. It's okay. We know of a few people who tend to not use doors, Minato said motioning to Jiraiya who scratched the back of his. The white-haired man nodded and walked out through the door with the other man following behind him. When the door closes everyone breathed easily despite how badly the meeting went. Well, that could have gone better, Kushina said as she checked her nails as everyone playfully glared at her while she whistled innocently. With Team 13, night began to fall as Naruto, Anko and Itachi sat at Ichiraku's ramen while Shizune sat to the side of them with Mito and Eiji by her side. She was looking after the children since after the meeting with the Raikage, many of the clan heads were having a get-together. Mito and Eiji sat on their seats playfully swinging their legs with noodle hanging from their lips while Naruto had little Mina seated on his lap who was now almost a year old and was clapping her hands as Naruto fed her a little bit of ramen. Those of Uzumaki blood just naturally like ramen, no matter how young, Shizune commented as Itachi and Anko nodded in agreement. You love ramen don't you Mina-chan? Naruto said to his baby sister who just nodded her head and gave him a smile showing the few teeth she had. Ah, she is so sweet aren't you Munchkin, Anko said. Despite being a very tough and tomboyish girl, even she had to admit that little Mina was adorable. Naruto smiled at the interaction between Mina and Anko while Itachi smiled at the scene. Naruto then felt a pull on his sleeve only to see Mito and Eiji looking at him with big eyes and holding their arms out. Naruto had a strange look on his face as he stared down at his two siblings. Despite loving them both, the whole thing with his parents and their attention was due to the twins and in all honesty he had been a little distant from Mito and Eiji, especially Mito since she was very clingy towards him and just wanted to follow him everywhere. Mina despite nearly being one was showing the same signs. The two little girls just loved being with their big brother. Eiji was the same but not as clingy. Shizune saw his slight dilemma and picked up the two twins. No, I want Naru, Mito complained as Eiji nodded in agreement but Shizune gave them a warm smile. No sweeties, it's time to go home. You both need your baths, she said getting a disagreeable look on the twins' faces. Mito-chan, Eiji-chan, Naruto said getting the twin attention. When I come home, I will try to read you a bedtime story, okay? He said getting smiles from the two making a small smile appear on Naruto's face in return. Shizune then put the two down and placed Mina into the stroller who began to cry a little, not wanting to be out of her big brother's warm embrace. Naruto, are you coming? Shizune asked. Not just yet, Nei-chan. I going to have one more bowl. Alright, but be home soon. You might be a shinobi now but you're still 9 and you need your sleep, she said. That goes for all of you too. Anko and Itachi nodded as well and then watched as Shizune gave Naruto a kiss on the forehead before leaving with Mito, Eiji and Mina back to their home. As they left, Naruto sensed the Anbus that were watching over them move to follow Shizune and his three siblings. They watched them go before Itachi turned to Naruto. Still trying to put space between them, aren't you? He asked as Naruto sighed a little and nodded. Anko looked at him weirdly. Why are you trying to put space between them? They are adorable. I just want to eat them up, she said while Naruto just didn't say anything. It's just some personal business, Anko-san, Itachi said, making Anko look at them both weirdly before she nodded. The trio sat there as they talked to one another, sometime also speaking to the ramen stand owner Tuki, who the three saw as a nice middle-aged man who was happy to help any who needed help. He had a daughter their age, Ayame, who they had seen a few times. As Anko and Itachi spoke with Itachi, Naruto's sensor abilities picked up on something that he felt was irregular. He could feel the Kumo shinobi along with the Raikage enter the moment they entered the village. The Raikage stood out among the other two since his power was enormous, the same as his father and his Jiji. Naruto hopped of the stool and stood in the middle of the empty street as he looked in the direction of where the signature was coming from. Naruto-kun, what is it? Anko asked as she and Itachi followed him. One of the Kumo shinobi, he said, already putting the two on alert. He not at the hotel with the others. He over by the Hyuga compound. Why is he there? Naruto said aloud, making Itachi and Anko widen their eyes. You don't think he is going to kidnap a Hyuga, do you? Anko asked, since they were both aware that Kumo for some reason desired the Hyuga clan dojutsu, the Byakugan. Let's go check it out, he said as the two nodded and headed towards the Hyuga compound. It only took a few minutes before they arrived on one of the buildings opposite the Hyuga compound, and Naruto immediately began scanning the area for the Kumo shinobi he could sense. After a moment of search, he saw a black-clad figure against one of the outer walls, showing it to be the Kumo shinobi with the forehead protector covering his right eye. In his right arm their eyes widened when they saw the Hyuga heiress, Hinata Hyuga, unconscious in his left arm. Anko, go warn my father. Now, he said as Anko did not need to be told twice before taking off as fast as she could. All the clan heads are at that gathering. He knew the head of the Hyuga clan would not be here, Itachi said as Naruto nodded. We have to buy some time. We can't let him get away. Naruto and Itachi took a deep breath, knowing this could go very badly, but they were shinobi of the lead now and it was their duty to protect the people who live there. As the Kumo shinobi was about to move, both boys threw shuriken towards him. The Kumo shinobi sensed them coming and dodged out the way and landed a little to his left. He looked to his left and his eyes widened a little when Naruto appeared a little in front of him with the shisui unsheathed and descending towards his head. He expressed interest in the black sword for a moment before he grabbed a kunai from his right pocket and blocked the strike, though buckled a little from the strength of the blade and saw his kunai crack in a few places. However, when he blocked and focused on Naruto, Itachi appeared to the side and grabbed Hinata from the man's grasp. They both heard the man curse loudly as Itachi jumped away as fast as he could, with Naruto doing the same. They regrouped with each other while protecting Hinata. Give me the girl, brats. You don't want to piss me off, he said, taunting them. We are shinobi of the leaf. We will not let you kidnap one of our own, Naruto said back. The man laughed before making a few hand seals. Let's see if the you brats can live up to what you claim, he said. Raiden. Dendo Underi. A thin wire of lightning erupted from his midsection and shot all around him and toward Naruto and Itachi, aiming for their stomach as if wanting to bisect them. Naruto jumped in the air while Itachi managed to jump just before the man performed the jutsu. When Naruto looked at Itachi, he saw red and 3 tomos in each eye. Sharingan, he thought, believed Itachi used it to predict the man's movement. As they jumped, the Kumo appeared in front of Naruto and kicked the small blonde and knocked him to the ground. He did the same to Itachi, but with the Sharingan activated, Itachi managed to dodge the swipes and kicked them and was giving him but could not attack due to having Hinata still in his arms. Itachi gritted his teeth a little since he could not fight back, but then heard Naruto voice. Water style. Water bullet, he said as balls of water made their way towards the Kumo ninja. The Kumo nin jumped out of the way, enabling Itachi to appear in the gardens of the Hyuga compound and lay her on the ground before going back to the battle. Returning, he saw Naruto with his blade redrawn, blocking quick and powerful strikes from the Kumo nin. Though Naruto was managing to block, the man's superior strength forced him to get pushed back and against a wall. The Kumo nin grinned before finding kunai being thrown towards him. Cursing again, he humped back and away from the kunai. Naruto and Itachi then stood next to one another and charged towards the enemy. Naruto threw punches and palm strike towards the Kumo Nin, specifically trying to hit a few of the weakened pressure points that Tsunade and Shizune had told him about. Itachi meanwhile was trying to sweep his legs with his Uchiha style. They tried pushing him back, but the man was an adult and his physical strength was superior, so they used their smaller bodies to dodge his strike, which were quite slow and were able to dodge them. Though he did manage to land a few hits on the two, he was surprised that they just kept getting back up and throwing strikes toward him. He swore he even felt a low-level genjutsu get put on him before he managed to quickly get rid of it with a pulse of chakra. The Uchiha, he thought, since he knew with the Sharingan, Itachi would try and put him in a genjutsu and trap him. The Kumo ninja started getting annoyed when the two genin did not let up before they both jumped back. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Itachi called as a fireball erupted from his mouth and toward the ninja. The ninja saw it coming and jumped in the air to dodge it, but his eyes widened when he saw Naruto was now in front of him and had Shisui drawn out again. Naruto swung his blade just as the Kumo Nin tried to push himself back. Despite the dodge, the tip of the Shisui sunk into the man and slashed him across the chest. Naruto landed next to Itachi, both who got in their stances again as the Kumo Nin fell back a little and gripped his chest. "You little shit," he said as he checked his wound and saw it was shallow but went across most of his chest. "What are these kids? They are no ordinary children," he said and looked into their eyes. Itachi with his Sharingan and Naruto with his violet eyes gazed intensely towards him. "Raiden. Saji Farasha," he said as his two hands surged with lightning and put them together. He did not realize that Itachi had just coped his jutsu when he saw the hand signs. Just as the attack was about to be sent off, another strong chakra signature appeared around them and a blur shot out from the Hyuga compound and struck the Kumo ninja in the chest. "Hake Sanjuni Sho," the Hyuga cried out as he struck the Kumo Nin 32 times in the chest. When it was over, Naruto and Itachi watched as the man stumbled back a little before blood spurted out of his mouth, his eyes rolled into the back of his head and dropped to the ground dead. They looked at the Hyuga and saw he looked just like the clan head Hiashi, making them realize he was Hisashi Hyuga, the younger twin brother of Hiashi Hyuga. Hisashi glared at the fallen man before he made his way over to the two boys and gave them a bow. "Thank you for protecting Hinata." They were about to respond before Naruto felt a large mass of multiple chakras appeared. From their right they looked over and watched as Naruto's parents, Jiraiya, Tsunade and the clan heads appeared along with a few Anbu. "Naru-chan. Itachi-kun." Naruto and Itachi winced a little when they heard their mother's voices and quickly found themselves glomped by Kushina and Makoto, who began to threaten check them over. Both saw the bruises that were beginning to form on their faces and glared towards the fallen shinobi. When the two mothers were told by the two boys they were okay, Kushina nodded and joined Minato, who was speaking to Hisashi with the others while Makoto hung back with the boys. Naruto watched as Itachi went a little red with Makoto still checking him over and was planting kisses on him. From where he could stand he could hear his mother saying they should check on the twins and Mina. Even now, they are all she can think about, Naruto thought a little bitterly as he looked down at the ground as he shook slightly. Shaking his head a little, Naruto began to walk away and just made his way home while Itachi gave him a sad glance while Makoto just wondered what had him so down. Meanwhile Tsunade and Hiruzen, who had heard what Kushina said, looked at Naruto with sadness in their eyes. "We need to talk to them about this Sarutobi-sensei. Look at Naru-chan, even if he doesn't necessarily show it, the way they treat him is affecting him. I heard from Shizune that he is distancing himself from the twins, it's like he doesn't want them to get too close to him," said Tsunade, worry clear in her voice. "While I agree with you, Tsunade-chan, the question still remains, how would we get them to see what they are doing to young Naruto? I doubt they even realize that their actions, or rather, inaction, is causing him any sort of grief," he replied, also worried about the young boy that he saw as a grandson. At moment the only thing we can do is wait and see if they will realize their mistake before it is too late. Naruto stood at the north gate of Konoha as he waited for his team and sensei to arrive so they could go on their mission. Today marked their first C-rank mission ever and Naruto could not help but feel a little excited. The night the Kumo shinobi had attempted to kidnap the Hyuga heiress, the Hyuga clan as well as the shinobi council had been extremely thankful towards him, Itachi and Anko, since if it was not for Naruto and Itachi holding the ninja back and Anko going to warn the Hokage, then they may have lost the Hyuga heiress. As a reward, they made the rescue a completed a ranked mission and all three genin got the pay. It also set a new record as Naruto, Itachi and Anko became the youngest team to ever go on an A-ranked mission. Makoto of course gave them a small scolding, but they knew that was just the mother in her talking. Though she was extremely proud of her first genin team and knew from that moment that Naruto, Itachi and Anko would go on to do great things. They had their test the next day, which was basically to let Makoto see their level of strength. She was not disappointed and, on more than one occasion, had found herself on the defensive before managing to push them back and subdue them. It made the trio realize that Makoto was a very powerful woman who had rightfully earned the title of Fire Mistress of the Leaf. Since then, for the next 6 months, they went on simple D-rank missions all around the Leaf Village. They came up with a simple routine, which was to perform D-rank missions in the morning, and then they would break for a lunch break before meeting up again for a few hours in the afternoon to train. Makoto had managed to find certain aspects with each of the three to help train them, in which she was thankful for, since she was not the type to leave one out while focusing on the other two. With Itachi, she helped him with his ninjutsu and genjutsu since they both had the Sharingan. Anko was taijutsu and she would spend a good hour or more just blazing it out with the girl while also focusing on her elemental ninjutsu, which she decided to learn after seeing the two boys use theirs for the first time. Not surprising, she had fire element as well, which was a bonus. With Naruto she struggled with for a short while before she could also help him with his taijutsu and kenjutsu. Though she used a tanto as a weapon other than a katana, the dynamic were similar, plus it gave Naruto plenty of time to practice his kenjutsu skills against his sensei and improve them. As Naruto thought of his skills, he looked down to the ground and stared at his two hands. He had always wondered what could help him stand out from his parents and teachers, since they were all very world-renowned. His father had the Hiroshin, his mother had her kenjutsu and both had fuinjutsu, Makoto had her fire jutsu, Tsunade her healing skills and super strength, Jiraiya had his toad jutsus, Kakashi had his chidori, Itachi his Sharingan, and Sarutobi with his bojutsu and decades of experience. He had wondered what would set him apart from the rest. And it was 1 month ago when he finally found just what that was. Flashback. Naruto panted a little as Tsunade threw another punch towards which he managed to jump to the side and dodge at the last second. He regained his footing and charged towards Tsunade. This was one of their normal taijutsu spars that Tsunade began ever since she began teaching him. They were in a small training on the Senju compound that they used recently over the few years, since Tsunade was the last of her clan and she did not want to see her ancestral home collect dust. He threw his right fist towards her, which she caught almost effortlessly in her right hand. When she did, Naruto's right leg came up and swung from the side as well. Tsunade brought up her left elbow and blocked the strike. "Got you now, Naru-chan," she said with a smirk before her eyes flickered to the side to see his left fist now coming toward her, having used the momentum to push another strike towards her. It was about to strike, but she dodged the strike by moving her head to the side before she spun around on the spot and threw him towards the other end of the area. Naruto managed to land on his feet, but due to the speed he was going at, he fell into his behind and hit a tree. From the sidelines, Shizune and Hiruzen winced a little at the impact but saw that Naruto was already getting back up before he went forward and charged again, quickly engaging Tsunade again. Naru-chan sure has spirit. He and Tsunade-sama have been going at it for 2 hours now and he is still going. Shizune commended, though she was not surprised given the Uzumaki stamina. Naruto-kun has come a long way in these few years. Hiruzen commented, amazed at how far the young blonde had come since he began his training with them. Are you and Tsunade still planning on showing him the Shozen Jutsu? He asked as Shizune nodded. Tsunade-sama wants him to know it just in case of emergencies, plus his chakra control has only gotten better. I dare say a few more years and his control might surpass my own. She had even been thinking of giving him the Sozo Seisei on his forehead, but she wanted to leave that decision to Naruto. Hiruzen nodded, knowing that while the Sozo Seisei Tsunade created was indeed amazing, it had its drawbacks by shortening one's lifespan. Back with Naruto, Naruto panted as Tsunade kept throwing him around like a rag doll. Her taijutsu is just too strong. It is no wonder she hardly needs to use any ninjutsu or genjutsu. He thought before his eyes widened when her hand glowed blue and she clenched it into a fist. Be ready, Naru-chan, she shouted to him before she brought her fist down to the earth, causing the ground in front of her to begin cracking apart and causing the earth to tear apart. The ground around Naruto felt like an earthquake and did his best to keep his footing. Tsunade's strength was always going to be a game changer, even if she was the one who was winning. When he was about to jump out of the war zone, he felt his foot get stuck and trapped between a piece of the rubble and kept him in place as the ground in front of him burst open and debris went flying towards him. Tsunade, Hiruzen and Shizune saw his foot had gotten stuck and were about to dash over to help him when they stopped and watched Naruto perform a feat Hiruzen and Tsunade never thought they would ever see again. Not knowing what to do, Naruto unconsciously channeled chakra into his hands and grasped his palms together. Just as the rubble was about to hit, pillars of wood suddenly shot out of the ground and formed a protective dome around him which stopped the debris in its tracks. As the shaking stopped, complete silence was heard as Naruto looked at the wooden dome in front of him with eyes widened so much they looked like they would fall out. To the side, the three older shinobi were in a similar state as Tsunade had even dropped to her knees as she saw one of her grandfather's techniques. It's not possible, Tsunade muttered, trying to understand what just happened while Shizune was muttering that it had to be some kind of genjutsu and tried to dispel it. Naruto, Hiruzen muttered as he looked at the boy who was in a similar state to them. Just what are you going to become? End flashback. A day I will never forget. Naruto thought as he and his three teachers came to the conclusion that somehow, which they were still trying to figure out, that Naruto had received the most legendary bloodline Konoha had ever had. The Mokuden. For the time being they kept it a secret, since if word got out to enemies of Konoha or even to some of the higher-ups in the village like the elders or Danzo that Naruto had the legendary Mokuden of the Shodai Hokage, Naruto's life would never be the same. Naruto-kun. He heard snapping him out of his daze as he saw Makoto along with Itachi and Anko at her side coming towards him. Do you have everything you need? Makoto asked as he showed a scroll in his right hand. So to recap, what was the mission again? Naruto asked, wanting to familiarize with the mission as much as possible. It's very simple really. We are to take this scroll. Makoto said, waving a small scroll in her hands before sealing it away into her wrist. And we have to deliver it to Mifune, the general of Iron Country. The scroll has updates on the next shipment of chakra metal that we get traded with from Iron Country. I thought Iron Country was a neutral country. Plus it has samurais, not ninja. Anko asked. It is, but even though it does not align itself with the other nations, it does trade with them since Iron Country is a cold nation and it needs things like food imported since they can't grow food well in cold climates. Then let's go. I can't wait. This will be my first time out of the village. Naruto said. Itachi quickly said the same while Anko stayed quiet. Team 13 set off from Konoha to the cold conditions of Iron Country. 2 days later, Naruto, Makoto, Itachi and Anko sat on 2 logs as they stopped for a short moment to take a breather from tree jumping and to get some food in their stomachs. 2 days of traveling were an interesting experience for the 3 genin since their D ranks only ever took a few hours at the most. Naruto was currently eating a few onigiri he had made prior to the mission. Another thing his nei-chan Shizune had drilled into his head was how to make simple basic meals that could be taken on missions and which would not take up much room. Onigiri had quickly gone to the top of the list and he made sure to make enough for the trip there and back. Makoto and Itachi were eating some leftover stew that Makoto had made for dinner before they left, while Anko was eating some dango she acquired before they left Konoha. As they ate, Naruto began to pick up on multiple signatures closing in around them and were coming towards them at a fast pace. He looked towards Makoto, who had already picked it up, as had Anko and Itachi. The four nodded to each other and silently readied their weapons. A minute later, a swarm of arrows suddenly flew out of the woods around them and hit them, only for all four members to burst into smoke and be replaced by a log. Naruto blocked a sword strike from an overweight bandit before he kicked the man in the gut, which knocked him back and knocked him out. A dozen or so men, who were obviously bandits, ran into the small area where they had been eating. They obviously thought they could win against 3 children and a woman. Where did they go? One asked as they looked over the logs that were now on the ground. Just as another was about to speak, a rustle from above them made them look up to see Team 13 drop out of the trees and in the center of them before they began to attack. Naruto dropped between two and managed to split kick them both in the face, making them get knocked back. When one of them got back up, he ducked a strike and landed a strong strike on his left kneecap, making it break in the process, as well as the bandit fell down holding his knee in pain. The other got up, but before he could do anything, Naruto threw a bunch of shuriken towards him, pinning him to the tree. From his side he watched as Makoto and Itachi easily took out the bandits around them, though Makoto just looked bored if anything and was simply chopping the back of their necks and quickly tying them up or drove her tanto through their chests. He watched as Anko shot a snake out of her sleeve, to which the snake then bit down on the man's jugular, causing blood to pour out of his throat and drop to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Anko had killed and he noticed she had no problem with it. It made him wonder if she had ever killed before. He dodged a swing of a large wooden club and kicked the man square in the face, making him fly back and hit a tree. He sensed around and felt there were only a few of the bandits left, which quickly were taken out by Itachi and Makoto. However, he suddenly felt a small burst of killing intent hit him. It was nothing in comparison to what he was used to during his spars with either Makoto or Tsunade, but it was enough for him to notice it. His body acting on autopilot, he turned round, readied his blade and threw it forward. When he did, he felt a small warm splash hit his face. He wiped his other hand over the wet splash and looked at his hand in front him. Blood. When he looked forward, he saw a man in his early 20s wearing similar clothing to the other bandits around them, with a chipped sword in his hand. Naruto's blade was in front of him, currently stabbing the young man in the chest. Naruto had a look of horror appear on his face as he realized what he had done, and his hand began to shake. His eyes stared into the man's brown ones and watched as they suddenly rolled into the back of his. Naruto slowly took his blade out of his chest and just stood there as the man fell to the ground as his breathing stopped completely. Naruto? Makoto asked from behind him as Anko was seen standing behind Itachi, who had just thrown up. He had taken his first life as well by snapping one of the bandits' necks. Anko patted his back gently as Itachi just stared down at the ground. I killed him. I didn't mean to, it just happened. My body reacted on its own. He said, stuttering as Makoto closed the distance between them and placed her hands on his shoulders. The first kill is always the hardest to take, she thought as Naruto suddenly ran from her grasp and, like Itachi had done moments ago, threw up behind a bush. As he did that, Makoto began collecting the bodies of the dead bandits and placed them in a pile. She then performed a few fire jutsus and set the bodies on fire so that the bodies could be properly disposed of. The ones that were still alive did not stay alive for long before Makoto slashed their throats with her tanto and added them to the burning fire. Afterward, her gaze softened towards Naruto and her son. This was one of the reasons she wanted this C rank. The way to Iron Country was known for having a lot of bandit encampments, and she wanted Naruto and Itachi to have their first kill. It was always tough for a genin to kill, but killing was in the job description of being a shinobi. She saw Anko was okay, which she knew she was. Anko had already killed due to her past tutoring. By having their first kill, they would not hesitate to do so again later on. Though she was 13 when she had her first kill, and the memory of the man she killed still appeared in her head from time to time, but Naruto and Itachi were strong, a lot stronger than others their age, and she knew deep down that they could take it, handle it, and rise above it. Come on, she said, patting Naruto and Itachi's shoulders and rubbing them gently. Let's get moving. We should cover as much ground as we can while we still have light, she said, making the three genin nod. Naruto and Itachi were a little slower than normal, but that's because their first kills were on their minds and would be for a few more days. 2 days later. The scroll we were sent to deliver, Mifune-sama, Makoto said as she, Naruto, Itachi, and Anko stood in a large office that had numerous blades and samurai armors decorating around it. On one of the walls was 3 picture frames hanging up showing 3 men all dressed in samurai armor and all looking very powerful and intimidating. Thank you, Uchiha-san, a man said from behind the desk as he took the scroll politely from her and began to read the contents of it. Mifune was an elderly man, so to speak, perhaps in his late 40s, early 50s. He had long purplish hair that showed signs of graying, along with bandages that wrapped around the top of his head, along with a small mustache. He wore a simple navy blue kimono with black sandals. Strapped to his side, Naruto saw a katana with a black handle strapped to his side. Beside him were 2 samurai wearing the traditional Iron Country armor along with the helmets, which Naruto had to admit looked a little strange. After a few minutes of reading with an expressionless look on his face, Mifune nodded and gave them a small smile. The terms in this scroll are agreeable. Allow me a few minutes to write up a reply scroll, he said as he brought out a blank scroll and some ink. He began to write as the team stood there silently as they waited. After he finished, he handed the new scroll back to Makoto, who bowed and thanked him. They were about to leave, but Mifune stopped them. If I were you, Uchiha-san, I would stay in town for a day or two. There is a strong blizzard that will be coming through the area tonight. Anyone who gets caught in it will most likely freeze to death, he said. I see. Thank you for the information and looking out for my team, Makoto said, bowing to him again to show her thanks. As Naruto, Itachi and Anko began to leave the room, Mifune used a few hand signals to send a silent message to Makoto. The 2 boys had looked so emotionless and both had a tired and worn out look on their faces. What is wrong with the 2 boys? Makoto sighed a little sadly and made a few hand signs in return. First kill. Mifune immediately had a look of understanding cross his face, since it did explain everything. He nodded to her as they left and sat back in his chair while putting his sword in his lap. He noticed Naruto's blade in his right hand, couldn't help but feel intrigued. He knew that not many from the Leaf practiced in Kenjutsu, and it made him a little curious at how he was progressing. Early next morning, Naruto lay on his bed as just stared up at the ceiling spread all over his futon with the image of the man he killed still on his mind. Every time he tried to fall asleep, he would see that man standing in front of him. I wonder if this happens to others who kill for the first time, he thought as he looked out the window to see it was still dark outside, though the morning sun was slowly pushing its way through. He looked over to see Itachi was asleep, having spoken with Makoto for a few hours about it the night before, and he looked a lot better than he did. Makoto did the same for Naruto, however, even with her words, it would not leave his mind. Realizing he would not be getting any more sleep for the time being, he got out of his futon and put his clothes on. He carried Shisui in his right hand and made his way out of his room, which Mifune had kindly given them during their stay in Iron Country and not get caught in the blizzard during the night. Making his way through the hallways as well as looking at some painting and decorative samurai armors that were presented on display, Naruto eventually stopped at one of the indoor training room that they were told they could use. Since the environment of Iron Country was not the best to train in, the samurai had multiple giant rooms made for the sole purpose of training. In the room Naruto went in there were training dummies made of both wood and stone, a large circle about 10 meters wide for small-time spars to take part in as well as racks for weapons of various kinds. He went over towards one of the wooden training dummies and unsheathed Shisui and began to train with his sword. The blade didn't feel very heavy to Naruto anymore since he had carried it around for nearly 6 months and had both grown accustomed to it as well as got physically stronger. For about 30 minutes Naruto danced around the wooden dummy slashing and stabbing at the straw dummy, though since he had no specific sword style, he was just sort of going with the strikes. From behind him a pair of eyes rested on him as they watched him attack the straw dummy. Where Naruto was, he could feel someone watching him but did not let on that he knew. They did not feel like a threat but more like they were curious. As if they wanted to see what he would do next. A few moments later the figure that was watching Naruto dashed forward at great speed with a katana in their hand and swung towards Naruto. Naruto, feeling them suddenly appear behind him, turned around as quick as he could and blocked the strike with Shisui. Turning around he was surprised to see Mifune standing there in front of him examining both Naruto and Naruto's sword. "Lord Mifune," Naruto said in surprise as he quickly sheathed his sword and gave the general of Iron Country a bow. "My apologies for engaging you," Naruto said but quickly saw that Mifune was waving it off. "I engaged you, young Namikaze. It is I who should apologize. I wanted to see how well you acted with a blade since I saw you carrying it the other day. I must admit your reaction time with it is quite impressive." Thank you, Lord Mifune," Naruto said, a little taken back that one of the best sword users in the world was complimenting him. "Though by your footwork and the way you hold the blade, you do not have a style for it," he asked as Naruto shook his head. "Does your mother Kushina Uzumaki not teach you? She is an expert in kenjutsu last I checked." Since he found it odd that a boy with a mother as well versed with a blade as Kushina was, did not have a sword style already. Mifune watched as Naruto shifted a little as well as saw this small look of bitterness cross his face. "My mother is a busy woman. She does not have the time to teach me and continue her other duties in the village," he said, looking away. "I see," Mifune said before his face softened a bit. "May I?" he asked, wanting to take a look at Shisui. Naruto was a little hesitant since his sword was becoming one of the most precious items he had, but allowed it. Mifune took it and immediately noticed that it was heavier than other blades. He also noticed how different looking it was since the metal was black with a red wave-like pattern going down the middle of the blade ending at the tip, but admired its unique beauty. "This is a strong blade. A blade meant for a lot of power and physical strength. To be able to hold a blade that is as heavy as it is at your age is impressive. Though you would need a style to fit this," he said as Naruto nodded. "Come," Mifune said as he gave Naruto Shisui back and headed towards one of the sparring circles. They stood in the circle and Mifune drew his blade out of its sheath as Naruto did the same. "Come at me with the intent to kill Naruto-san. Otherwise don't attack at all." Naruto bit his lip a little but nodded. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the handle of Shisui in a tight grip, though not too tight, and went forward towards Mifune. He swung at Mifune, who easily blocked the strike with his blade and first acted on the defensive, letting Naruto get a few strikes in. Every strike Naruto sent towards Mifune, the experienced samurai blocked it each time and blocked it with little difficulty. "You must try much harder than that," Mifune said to Naruto as he spun, catching Naruto off balance and knocked Naruto in the chest with the back on his sword and making him stumble back. Shaking his head, Naruto went forward again, this time striking at a fast speed and trying to catch Mifune off guard. Mifune, though, once again blocked with ease and dodged the strikes. Naruto swung Shisui a little higher than before and brought it down at a greater speed and with a bit more power behind it. Mifune locked his blade with Naruto's, making a loud clang sound out through the training area. Naruto tried to push back, but Mifune's strength was greater and Mifune pushed him back before pushing him off a little bit and, like earlier, knocked Naruto back with the back of his sword. Naruto breathed in and out a little heavily, getting a little frustrated that he could not land a single strike on Mifune. He charged forward for a third time, but this time Mifune locked his sword with Naruto, spun it around in Naruto's hand before disarming Naruto with a swift chop to the back of his hand, making him drop Shisui. No, Naruto thought as he watched Mifune swung his sword towards him, obviously putting Naruto on the post and wanting him to think of his own way to get his sword back. As the strike was about to hit him, Naruto took a leap of faith. Please let this work, he thought as he waited for the strike to hit before he felt the air shift a little. Raising his hands up, he threw his hands in front of him and caught the blade in his palms. Mifune for one was a little taken back by the sudden move. The strike may not have been very strong since he was holding back a lot, but still to catch the blade in two palms like that had impressed Mifune. Not bad, he thought as he slid the blade out of Naruto's palms. He swung again towards Naruto, but this time Naruto used his stature to his use, ducked, and rolled towards his blade. Picking the Shisui up, he brought it up and deflected another strike. Not bad. Now you are thinking like a swordsman, however, you should never drop your sword in battle as your opponent may use it against you. Mifune said, and leading to example, pushed Naruto away again, but this time knocking Shisui out of his just enough to make it fly in the air. Mifune reached and grabbed it before holding the two blades against Naruto's neck in a scissor-like form. Naruto meanwhile was a little awestruck at how quickly that just happened, reaffirming how strong Mifune was. Mifune examined the boy. He has talent, that's for sure. If he works hard enough and find the right style, then he will be a force to be reckoned with. Mifune gave the sword back to Naruto, who accepted it before taking a few steps back. He sheathed his sword, but kept his hand on the handle. Again, he said, making Naruto look at him for a few seconds before smiling internally and charging forward as the two sparred for the next few hours, Mifune fully believing that Naruto was going to be a force to be reckoned with as he got older. One day later, Naruto packed his belongings and put them away into a storage seal as he and his team prepared to set off back for the Leaf Village. Itachi, Makoto, and Anko were waiting for him just outside the room as Naruto finished the last of his packing. Shisui was strapped to his side as he patted the handle. Having sparred with Mifune a lot during the stay, Naruto felt that he somewhat improved as a swordsman and was taught that to be a great swordsman, his sword must become one with him, like it was an extension of his body. Mifune also drilled into him to have patience, since patience was a key element for a swordsman. After their last spar, Mifune had been impressed with Naruto and told him to get stronger so that one day Naruto and Mifune could have a clash of swords like never before. As Naruto was about to leave, a small breeze went through the room, making Naruto stop, and a chakra signature appeared suddenly. However, it disappeared as quickly as it came. Turning around, he saw on one of the side tables a slightly large scroll now stood out. He went towards it and saw a note on the side. This style has no master and has yet to be mastered. It will teach you the basics and fundamentals but will allow you to create your own techniques. Perhaps you can be the first. Mifune. Naruto's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He was thankful that the general of Iron Country was nice enough to point out a few of his flaws and help improve them as well as a part with him, but now he really had to thank the man, for he believed he had found a style that would fit him. Naruto took the scroll and read the name of the side of it. Itoryu, One Sword Style. Weird name, Naruto thought as he opened it up and took a few glances at it before a grin appeared on his face. This is perfect, Naruto muttered before quickly sealing the scroll into a storage seal on his arm. As he left the room, he didn't notice Mifune standing with his back to the wall beside the window with his arms crossed and eyes shut. I look forward to seeing who you become, young Uzumaki, he said before disappearing. Naruto met back up with his team, looking back for a second at the compound before they finally began making their way back to Konoha. And so do the three of you understand the importance of this? Minato asked in full Hokage mode as he sat behind his desk with Team 13 and Makoto standing in front of him. Yes, Hokage-sama, Naruto, Itachi and Anko replied back in a respectful tone. Very good, The three of you are the only team from the Leaf Village this time around who will be competing in the Chunin exams, therefore the village has a lot of high hopes for the three of you. Yes, Hokage-sama, they said again. Makoto watched her team with pride evident in her eyes. And above all else, give it your all and know that Konoha and all its inhabitants, shinobi and civilian, are behind you 100% and will be rooting for you every step of the way. The three of you are the best crop of genin we have had in a very long time. With what your sensei has been telling me, the three of you are more than ready for these exams, Minato said, looking at Naruto with pride evident on his face. Though Naruto remained emotionless and looked at his father with slightly bored eyes. Thank you, Hokage-sama. We will do our best, the three said in unison. Minato nodded as he gave them their forms. Remember, you need those forms to get into the exams. So if you lose those forms, then none of you will be able to enter. The Chunin exams this year will be held in Suna, which is 3 days' journey away. The exams begin in 5 days, so you will need to get moving by tomorrow, he said as the three genin nodded and bowed to their Hokage before they turned to leave the room. Naruto, your Ka-chan would like to know what you want for dinner this evening since you won't be home for a while. She said she will make you whatever you want, Minato said, thinking Naruto would be smiling a big smile since he always enjoyed Kushina's cooking. Naruto heard his father and slowly turned around, which surprised Minato and Makoto when they saw he was looking at them still with a emotionless look on his face. Tell Ka-chan not to worry. I'm having dinner around Gigi's tonight, he said. Before either could say anything, he shunshined away, leaving the two adults as the only ones left in the room. What was that about? Minato asked to himself as he looked at where his eldest was standing before turning towards Makoto. Makoto was also looking towards the spot where he had been standing with a similar thought in her head. She had begun to notice more and more lately that Naruto was becoming very distant, and one would even say a little cold towards his parents. He even tried to keep away from his siblings, though she quickly saw that was not possible due to Mina and Mito's clinginess. Plus, he had been spending a lot more time at their compound with Itachi and Anko. I'm sure it is just nerves, Makoto answered. I bet the shock of him being entered in the Chunin exam has made him a little nervous and a little withdrawn. We were all at that stage when we went to our Chunin exams. Do you remember Kushina during hers when she was 14? She asked, making Minato chuckle at the memory. Kushina had been so excited to being put into the Chunin exams that when the day actually arrived, she became a nervous wreck and on more than one occasion tried to pull out. Though when her confidence finally came back, she made sure everyone knew that she was going to become a Chunin and kick there to the moon and back. Naruto is probably just handling it differently. We all do handle certain situations differently. Minato sat there for a few moments before smiling. Yeah, you are probably right. I'm sure that's what it is. Though Kushina will be a little crushed that he won't be here tonight, but I'm sure she will understand, he said before saying goodbye to Makoto and preparing to face the cage's greatest enemy of all time. Paperwork. Makoto, meanwhile, as she left the room, had a frown marring on her face as she thought about her blonde-haired student and genin. Naruto, what is wrong? What are you trying to hide? The Uchiha compound. Makoto shunshined back home and immediately sought out her eldest son to ask him about Naruto's actions towards his parents. She found in the backyard playing with his younger sister, smiling towards his little sister. She walked forward and said, Itachi, I wish to ask you something about Naruto. So you noticed then, the way Naruto acts towards his family? Asked Itachi with a sad look on his face, as he thought about his closest friend and the problems he had at home. Yes, I noticed. What is that about? He is so cold towards his parents and tries to push away his siblings. She asked, concerned about her student's well-being as well as the state of her best friend and rival's home. When I first met Naruto, we were both 7, as you remember. He stated, and continued when his mother nodded. Well, one of the first things I learned about him was that was very good at Fuinjutsu. Yes, which is to be expected with who his parents are. I am sure that they taught him about Fuinjutsu at a young age, as is tradition of the Uzumaki clan. She stated, not knowing where this was going. It wasn't his parents who taught him Fuinjutsu, it was the Sandame. In fact, his parents didn't even teach him the basics of chakra control, he learned it from Shizune-san. Replied Itachi, pausing to let everything he said sink in. But, why would he have to learn such things from other people? Surely if he had asked, his parents would have gladly taught him. She asked, not sure if she wanted to know the answer. Itachi just shook his head and looked towards Hokage Mountain, where you could just make out two figures on top of the Yondaime's head. Naruto did ask them to teach him, however ever since the twins were born they have become less attentive towards him. When Naruto asked his father and mother to teach him Fuinjutsu, his father simply gave him a book to give to the Sandame when he took his lessons. He asked his mother to help him with his chakra and to learn about it instead of making a shadow clone to do so. She told him that she was too busy and then passed him off to Shizune. Makoto looked over at her son in shock and then towards the blonde speck on top of the mountain with sadness in her eyes. She couldn't understand what could possess two of her closest friends to act this way towards their son. Why haven't you or anyone confronted them about how they treat Naruto? It's not how you think. They aren't doing it on purpose. They are unintentionally favoring the twins. As for why we haven't confronted them, Naruto told everyone not to. He thinks that it won't change anything, so he would rather endure it rather than have his parents think that he is starting things because he is jealous of the twins, which he is not. Responded Itachi, smiling slightly as he turned towards his mother, which confused her greatly. After all, why would he be happy about that? Even after how his parents have treated him, albeit unintentionally, he loves his younger siblings to death. Mina, Mito, and Eiji mean the world to him and he would fight to the death to ensure their safety. So, then his taijutsu and kenjutsu, they aren't anything that Minato or Kushina use, so who taught him? She asked, smiling sadly at the fact her student was suffering and she couldn't do anything about it. His taijutsu, as I'm sure you have realized, is a bastardized version of the Senju style in Goken. He was taught the Senju style by Tsunade-sama, however the Senju style is defensive like the Uchiha style, so in order to counteract that problem he asked Gai-san to teach him Goken. Also the Senju style and Goken were too restrictive for him, so he adjusted each style to work better with his body type. Said Itachi as he made a face at little Ria, which made her giggle and smile at her big brother. I thought it seemed familiar, though I have trouble following it with my Sharingan. Do you have the same problem? She asked, since even though he was younger Itachi's eyes were sharper than hers. Yes, I have much trouble following it since his style is more free-form than the normal structured style of either style, though I would be surprised if it was like that on purpose. Naruto and I are friends as well as rivals, so it would make sense for him to have something to counteract my eyes. You asked about his kenjutsu, correct? Itachi asked, still playing with Ria. Yes, I did. I have never seen anything like it in all of Hai no Kuni. She replied, smiling as she watched her eldest and youngest play. That would be because it is from Testu no Kuni and has never been used or mastered as, like his taijutsu, it is free-formed. Apparently Mifune-sama saw that Naruto was having trouble with his first kill and found Naruto training in kenjutsu, which at that point he didn't even have a style, just natural talent. They sparred while we waited out the storm at night. When we left, Mifune left him a scroll with the footwork and a challenge for him to become strong enough to face him on an equal footing one day. He said as he picked up Ria to take her inside for her nap, leaving his mother to mull over what she had been told. I will have to talk to Naruto to get the full story from him, though you can't help but be impressed that he has come so far with so little help. She thought, hoping to help the little boy whom she saw as a nephew. With Naruto. So you are going to be in the Chunin exams. Are you excited? Sarutobi asked Naruto as the two sat on top of the Shadaime Hokage's head on the Hokage monument as they looked over the village as the sun began to disappear and let night settle in. Beside him, Naruto gave him an excited smile. I really want to test myself against other strong people from the other villages. The stronger the better, I say. Well, remember not to get into over your head. If you get too overconfident and cocky, then it may lead to your downfall. I have seen it do that to my shinobi during my life. Sarutobi lightly scolded, but Naruto nodded. I know, but I am just excited, that's all, he said, a complete 180 turn from what he was acting like earlier. Well, that is good then. Will you say goodbye to Tsunade and Shizune before you leave? He asked, with Naruto quickly nodding. Good. I know they will miss you while you are gone. Those two will miss having their little blonde sunshine not be around for a while. Sarutobi then laughed at the pout on Naruto's face at being called a blonde sunshine. I will miss them too, but it won't be for long. Plus, if I make it into the final round, you will all come and watch me, right? Just try and stop us, Hiruzen said, making Naruto smile brightly. You would need an army of shinobi and more to stop Tsunade from going, he thought, since Tsunade truly did love and care for Naruto just like she did for Naoki, but in a more maternal way. The same could be said for Shizune, since she had a big soft spot for the young blonde Uzumaki. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Shaking his head, Sarutobi then put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and gave him a serious look and telling him to pay close attention. Naruto knew this was his Jiji slipping into his Kami no Shinobi mode. Since there are going to be shinobi from other villages, there is a chance they will recognize you by your appearance and your name. Ninja of Kumo and Iwa will most likely be participating, so you must be on your guard, he said as Naruto nodded. Especially after the Kumo incident here a year ago, we have become wary around them. I still don't understand why the alliance never happened. The Raikage said he knew nothing about the abduction and that the Kumo nin had done it on his own accord. I could feel his chakra Jiji. If he was lying, then his chakra would have been all over the place. He was telling the truth. Yes, well, unfortunately, Naruto, even with that statement, the word of a lone genin would not be enough to change the mind of your father and the Shinobi Council. Plus, due to your mother's past experiences with Kumo, she already did not like the fact that they were here in the village. Naruto sorted a little, which was very much unusual for him. He responded very sarcastically. Yes, because those two were going to listen to me even if it was enough. Hiruzen frowned a little at the statement, but Naruto quickly changed the subject. I am also guessing that using my hidden bloodline is also a big no-no for the Chunin exams. He said, despite already knowing the answer. Yes, Naruto, it is imperative that no one knows you have the Mokuden until you are older and strong enough to fight off most threats. Because other villages might try to have me taken out if they find out. He asked as Hiruzen nodded his head. The Mokuden Naruto is recognized as one of the strongest bloodlines in the entire world. It is rivaled only by the Sharingan, yet many believe it is superior than the Dojutsu. The power to control and suppress the power of a tail beast is a power that many will desire. Plus, there are people in the village that might try to take advantage of it, he said as Hiruzen's face darkened a little. Yes. There are those in the shadows of the Konoha that will try to use that power, which could end up hurting the leaf more than helping it, he said as his thoughts trekked first to a few members of the councils who were known to be rather power-hungry before it settled on his old teammate in Konoha's Warhawk Danzo. If Danzo ever gets his claws into Naruto, the man would not stop until Konoha is under his control, he thought before Naruto and Hiruzen let silence take over. One thought about who and what he would face in the future, while the other thought of the obstacles that his surrogate grandson would one day have to face. 5 days later, a cloaked-covered Team 13 trekked through the sands of the desert as they walked towards the giant gate of the Sunagaker. The gates were made of massive stone and had 2 Chunin guards similar to what Konoha had stationed at the gate. Halt! State your names and purpose for coming to the Sunagaker, one of the Chunin said as Makoto took off her hood and showed her Konoha headband. Makoto Uchiha with her Genin team, here for the Chunin exams, she said as she handed the Chunin some forms as they looked it over. After a minute of looking, the guards nodded their heads. You're all a little late, aren't you? The exams start in an hour and most of the team are either already there or are heading that way. We got caught up in a sandstorm on the way here, so we had to take cover. We should have been here yesterday afternoon, but we had to bunker down for a day and let the storm pass. The Chunin both nodded in understanding since sandstorms were very common in the desert of Suna. If you got caught in one or attempted to brave it, then you most likely would not make it. Okay, well, the Chunin exams are taking place in the academy building on the west side of the village. You will probably see a few team head in that direction, so just follow them, one of the Chunin said as Makoto and the three genin all nodded and walked on through. Team 13 quickly made their way through the gates and headed towards their lodgings, which were at the Desert Possum Hotel. Once there, they deposited their bags while Naruto, Itachi and Anko kept the things they knew they would need for these exams. Once done, Makoto led the trio towards the academy building on the east side. As they made their way there, they spotted a few other teams from the other villages. One was a group from Grass Country, if the headbands were anything to go by, while another was from the rain. They kept their guard just in case until after 10 minutes they arrived at the academy building. Makoto stopped at the entrance and turned to look at her team, a proud smile marring on her face. You all have everything you need, right? She asked as the trio nodded at her. Know that the three of you have made me so proud this past year and are about to do something that very few people can say they have done within the space of a year. I know the three of you are going to go on to do great things if what I have seen from the three of you is anything to go by. I know the three of you can go all the way in this exam, but remember that in this exam not everything will be what it seems. So look underneath and pick out things that may seem little, but will end playing a big part in these exams. Naruto, Itachi and Anko smiled towards their teacher and in Itachi's case mother and bowed to her. Thank you for putting your faith in us, Makoto-sensei, Ka-san, and thank you for helping us get to this point in our ninja careers. Without you, we probably would not have gotten this far. Leaning down, Makoto placed a kiss on each of their foreheads, keeping her lips on Itachi's forehead a little longer than Naruto and Anko, and fought to keep any tears at bay. Though she had only been their sensei for a year, she had loved every moment of having the chance to train her eldest son and his two friends. We promise we will do our best and honor your teachings, they said together again as Makoto stood to the side and allowed them entry into the building. How them all and show the world why the three of you will one day be legends, she whispered to herself as she watched them go. Taking a slow breath, she shunshined away and went to join the other Jonin instructors, wanting to watch as her team progressed through the exam. With Team 13, Naruto walked in the center with Itachi on his right and Anko on his left as the trio made their way through the hallways of the academy. As they walked in, a Chunin proctor instructed them that the exams was on the 3rd floor and in the room 3A. As soon as the man had said that, the three already knew something about this exam was already fishy. As they walked up the stairs of the academy building, once they got up the stairs they saw the room 3A in clear writing and saw a Grass Nin team head into the room. Anko, thinking nothing of it at first, walked forwards and went towards the door but stopped when she felt Naruto and Itachi's hand rest on her shoulders. Hold up, Anko, this is not our floor, he said, making her look at him in a confused manner. But the door is right there. 3A, she said, but by the look on their faces she guessed that was not quite the case. What number was the room again? He asked as Anko lazily told him it was 3A. Right, so then how many flights of stairs have we gone up so far? 2. She trailed off before her eyes widened a little as she realized what he was getting at. She turned back around and looked at the sign which read 3A. She gazed at it as strongly for a moment before seeing the words flicker on it. A genjutsu, she whispered as the others too nodded. It caused her to groan. Ah, I can't believe I almost fell for that, she whined as Itachi gave an amused smirk across his face while Naruto put an arm around her shoulders. Don't worry, Anko-chan. It will happen to the best of us. That genjutsu, I am guessing that is there to weed out the groups that are not ready for the exams. If they can't see through a simple genjutsu like that, then it means they are not ready. Since we noticed it, it means we are ready, Itachi added as they watched Anko's eyes ignite into flames as her drive to pass the exams got even stronger. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go kick some ass, she declared as she grabbed Naruto and Itachi's hand and began dragging them up the third flight of stair. When they finally got to their floor, they saw the real door that they required. They narrowed their eyes on this one to see if it was a genjutsu, but quickly their faces calmed, seeing it was the real one this time. They walked together and after taking a deep breath slid the door open and went inside. When they went in they felt a little nervous, though they never showed it. All around the room were genin teams that look a lot older than they were. Many were in their teens, and as they looked around saw that the oldest must have been about 16. Great, more kids, they heard one of them snort out, but Naruto quickly noticed that many of them were gazing at him. That kid looks familiar. You don't think he is the Kiroi Seiko's Yellow Flash kid, do you? Another whispered while others contemplated the idea. If he is, then this exam has got more fun, another said, showing from his headband he was from Kumo. If he is, then it must mean he is the Benihim's Crimson Princess son too. Naruto breathed calmly as he, Itachi and Anko went and stood on one of the back walls. There are a lot of teams here, Anko muttered out as she looked over the teams before she smiled a blood-curdling smile. It just means there are more people to cut and make bleed. Both Naruto and Itachi rolled their eyes at their female teammate but figured it was good that she was at least confident. The two of them were confident, but they knew not to get too overconfident, since getting cocky can easily lead to someone getting killed. Deciding to scope out the other teams, Naruto examined the other team, looking for any weaknesses he thought they might have, as well looking to see what nation they came from. The first he noticed that a lot was from the minor nation like grass, rain and even bird country. Since they were smaller in size, Naruto guessed they needed more Chunin level shinobi. There was about 2 from Kumo that kept sneaking glances towards him, but he also noticed there were no teams from Kiri. But he already knew why though. It was quickly known through Konoha that a civil war had erupted in the Hidden Mist village, and currently the Mizukage, who was known as Yagura, was at war with rebel forces that wanted him gone. From what Hiruzen had told him, it was due to Yagura wanting the bloodline eradicated, and he saw them as a threat. Naruto quickly figured that Yagura was not a man that should be left to be in charge of an entire village. Looking over the team once more, he was about to look away, having seen all the teams before. His eyes locked in on a team that was on the other side of the room and leaning against the opposite wall. He knew immediately from their headbands they were from Iowa, and they looked like an interesting trio. He also seemed interested in them, since by the look of them they must have been the same age as Naruto, Itachi and Anko was. The first one he noticed was the biggest of them, who was easily the size of a middle-aged teen and was quite chubby. He wore standard red Iowa clothing, and as for his feature, he had a very large round nose that stuck out like a sore thumb. Though the boy had a very happy-go-lucky expression on his face, indicating he must have been quite innocent and childlike. The other was the second male member, who for some reason just gave Naruto a bad feeling. He had long straw blonde hair that covered part of his left eye and wore clothes similar to Itachi, which were dark blue in color. His hand kept playing around with some white clay and looked like he was molding it into shapes. Naruto could see that Itachi had honed in on the same group and had his Sharingan activated very subtly, and guessed he felt something a little off about the blonde boy as well. As Itachi focused on his, Naruto eyes panned to the final member and the only girl of the group. She was quite pretty looking and had dark hair that stopped a little below her chin. She wore something similar to the big kid, but her left leg, instead of a red pants leg, was instead a mesh coat. When he started at her, she saw that she turned her head and looked in his direction. When she did, Naruto saw her eyes and saw they were a very exotic color of pink. Her eyes are really pretty, he thought to himself, having never seen an eye color like that before. Noticing she narrowed her eyes at him and scowled a little. When she turned her head again to look away from him, a small burst of some smoke appeared at the front of the class, showing the form of Asuna Kunoichi. She was clearly a Jonin, and just by looking at her, Naruto, Itachi and Anko could tell she was someone with a lot of power behind her, and that she was a seasoned shinobi despite her young appearance. She had to have been in her early to mid-20s. She was fair-skinned with pupil-less brown eyes that were very cold-looking, and her hair was dark green with two bangs framing her face that were orange. She wore sleeveless, backless top and short tight pants, with two lapels on the front and the back. She wears an obi around her waist, as well as purple arm warmers which extend up to her shoulders, and has bandages around her tights and ankles. Alright meat bags, listen up and do not interrupt. My name is Pakura and I will be your proctor throughout the entire Chunin exams. From now until the end of the exams I will be your judge, jury and executioner. If I tell you to do something you do it. Is that understood? She declared as everyone nodded their heads. Everyone go around the tables and sit in the seat with your name on it, she said as everyone began moving around. Naruto found himself at the front and found out that he was sitting beside none other than the Iwa Kunoichi. Though she completely ignored him and made sure not to even look at him. Anko was in the middle room while Itachi was at the second to last row. The trio was completed separated. The first test is a written exam, she said as a few of the station chunin that appeared in the room began laying out exam papers in front of them. Answer the questions as best as you can, however be warned that if you are caught cheating you and your teammates will be sent out of this room and you will fail the chunin exams. No pressure then, Naruto thought. You have 50 minutes to answer the 9 questions on the paper before we will stop the exam and give you the choice to answer the 10th question. Your time will start now, she declared as man of the genin got their heads down and began writing. Naruto also put his head down as he began to read the question, but quickly knew something was off about the test when he saw the questions. They can't expect us to know this surely. He thought to himself, seeing the question were ones that some jonin probably would not even know. While he could answer 3 or 4 of them, the others left him a little baffled. There is something about this. He began to scan around the room as discreetly as he could. As he did, some of the chunin judges began calling out numbers and started sending some of the people out of the room. Many grumbled and claimed they were not cheating, but it did not matter since they were forced out if they did not comply quietly. He looked to his side at the Iwa Kunoichi, was a little surprised to see that she had forehead protector strapped around her wrist and was using it as a reflector to see the exam sheet from the person behind her. She is cheating and not getting caught, he thought as he then turned to try and see his teammates. When he saw Itachi, he saw his Sharingan was on and was copying the hand movements of the guy in front of him, while Anko had a small snake besides her which was relaying the answers from the person behind her. We have to cheat. That is the aim of the first exam, he thought as it finally clicked. Smirking a little to himself, he first answered the question he did know before he put his hands behind his head, and leaned back on the chair and closed his eyes, letting himself feel the chakra of all the people in the room. He could feel most were nervous and scared while only a few were keeping together. A few of the chunin proctors looked at Naruto in surprise and saw one of his hands take the pencil on the desk and write a few things before putting it down. He did that continuously for the rest of the 50 minutes. Pakura raised an eyebrow at the kid, wondering what kind of trick he was pulling. Everyone pencil down and listen up, Pakura suddenly spoke, gathering all the attention towards her as everyone complied with the order. Alright, are you all ready for the final question? Pakura asked as they all nodded their heads. Good, because know now if you quit you will be disqualified from the exams, however if you choose to take it and you fail, you will never get promoted and will remain a genin for the rest of your life. She said, flaring her ki, now causing worry and panic to fill most people in the room as many began shouting at how, telling her that it was not fair. Konoha's ninja and Iwa's ninja all stayed silent though as they listened to the others complain. Naruto watched as about 4 teams got up and left the room, not wanting to take the chance. So you think you got what it takes, Gaki? You think because of who you are, you think you can make it? Pakura said towards Naruto, wanting to see how tough the blonde boy was and if he was ready and how he would take the jab. Naruto though just shrugged at her question, gaining looks from many including the Iwa girl next to him. I don't really know, but I do know that I won't let your little trick of trying to demoralize us get to me. This question is all about whether or not we are willing to risk it all. We are shinobi and we will be risking our lives every time we go on a mission and step out of our village. If I was not ready to take those risks, then I would not be sitting here waiting for you to give us the 10th question, would I, Proctor-san? Oh, and Proctor-san, just to clarify for you, I am not doing this because of who my parents are. To be honest, I could not care what you think or what anyone else thinks. I am doing this for me because I believe I am ready. So do not insinuate because of my last name that I think I will get it easy, because that is the last thing I want to happen. While his two teammates grinned, Pakura looked around the room to see others who had been ready to leave were now sitting put. His little speech giving them what strength they needed to stay put. Pakura sighed before giving them all the evil eye. For those who are still here, then I will tell you all this now. Pakura spoke as she raised her chakra levels to intimidate the genin, which worked as she showed of her power. You, pass. When she spoke, many looked confused and asked about the 10th question, to which she began explaining to them that the choice to take the risk of continuing was the 10th question, and that everyone that remained had moved on to the second part of the exam, much to their delight and others' relief. Now that the first part is over, go and get in your teams, she said as many shrugged their shoulders and did just that. Pretty nice speech you gave us all there. Anko commented as Naruto shrugged. I did my best. Hope you liked it. It was very informative, plus it's probably what made everyone else stay here, she said as Itachi nodded in agreement. Naruto turned around and noticed that the Iowa girl he was sat next to was looking at him with an unreadable expression before she turned her head and looked away. Listen up. Pakura called, getting everyone's attention. Now that the first test is over, we can begin the second, she said as she had a devious smile appear on her face, and Naruto began to notice the other Chunin proctors had now vanished from sight. Kai, she said as she made a hand seal with her right hand, and suddenly out of nowhere around them small paper notes began to shine, similar to how explosive notes did. However, instead of an explosion, a torrent of gas began to shoot out. As soon as the gas hit them, all the teams began to feel drowsy, and one by one they began to fall to the ground. Knockout gas. What the hell is the second exam then? Naruto said to himself, as Anko collapsed in front of him and fell asleep, with Itachi falling next before Naruto finally went down, being the last in the room to go down. Pakura then reappeared along with a couple of dozen other shinobi, which included Makoto, who went forward towards her team. You three have done well to get past the first exam, but now the second exam will be much harder, and it will test your teamwork and your survival skills, she said as she grabbed a hold of the three of them and shunshined away, just like the other senseis did with their genin teams. When they were gone, Pakura went around the room and began picking up the papers. When she got to Naruto, though, she found a few of the answer had been written, it which she saw were correct, while on the other question he had begun playing game of tic-tac-toe. Seeing it, it made her snort and shake her head. I just passed a genin that did not even take this first exam seriously, and who will no doubt be a big player in this exam, she thought as she continued to collect the papers. This year's Chunin exams are going to be an interest, that is for sure, she thought as she finished picking up the papers and shunshined away, leaving a now empty classroom.